Um, all right, I'm Jason Kander,
And I'm Ravi Gupta.
and this is Majority 54, the podcast for meaningful conversations that change minds, change votes, and win elections. Welcome to our first virtual live. I think it's just live. I don't know, recording. I guess it's virtual because we've actually done events with humans in the same room with us before. We're so excited to have you all here with us tonight to discuss and reflect. Anyway, to possibly freak out. Let's just cut to it. Ravi, how you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good.
Yeah, me too.
The key, they say the key to happiness is low expectations.
No shit.
That's where we are right now. And, most indications are good. Obviously, there's some issues. There's some like disappointing results, but there's without question, there is no red wave right now, unless we have some kind of unprecedented bad run out west. But we've won some really key races: the Spanberger race, the Rhode Island congressional race. Hassan held on, Bennett held on, and pretty quickly those races were called. So those are all really good news. It even seems that Boebert might be in trouble in Colorado, which is really interesting.
It's like, by the way, the guy running, Adam Frisch, who I don't know, but I do know his wife a little bit. She's like a distant cousin of mine. So does that make him?
Really?
So does that mean, do I get to take some sort of distant credit? I don't think I do.
I think so.
But it's exciting. But I was texting with her earlier and she's like, yeah, I think we might pull this off. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, obviously there's some bad news. Franken lost in Iowa. Vance won in Ohio, which is hugely disappointing. Eric Lynn lost in Florida. DeSantis dominated in Florida, which is this whole separate conversation about the GOP politics after this. I've been texting with some people in the sort of GOP circles, and there's a lot of conversations about, pointing fingers at Trump for some of the candidate quality here. And DeSantis looks very strong from a GOP perspective after this. I think what we're going to see is Trump is going to announce for president pretty quickly after this. And I think he'll still have his cult of personality, but I think there'll be a little bit of momentum in the DeSantis camp coming out of this, given how strong he held Florida. So
I saw a poll the other day that had that asked Republicans who had voted for Trump, do you see yourself more as a Trump person or as a Republican? And like in 2020, I think it was 54% or some, which is a funny number given our show, but it was, I think that's what it was. We're saying that they were Trump first and then, Republican second. And that number, last I saw, was down to 30.
Oh, wow.
So I totally think DeSantis could end up being the nominee. Huge news. Tom Cotton announced the other day that he wasn't going to run. So that obviously just earth-shaking.
We should have led the show with that. Should we do this? Should we redo this? Well, to put a couple of historical, and by the way, Westmore won.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Westmore,
Josh Shapiro won also.
Third Black governor elected in the history of the country,
that's insane.
Yeah, I mean, like, how is that even? Anyway, but awesome. I mean, we love West, and I mean Maryland's going to do incredible things, and so does West. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, and I'll read you a couple of tweets. This is from Tim Alberta, who covers Republican politics for Politico, I think. He's written a bunch of really good books. He tweeted a little while ago, "This is not a red tsunami. In fact, it might be shaping up as the best midterm cycle for an incumbent president's party since the rally around the flag election of 2002. This stuff makes me nervous saying that. I'm just saying it. I'm just, look, it's their words. Nate Cohn at 10:25. We're recording this at 11 for folks who are listening to the podcast in the morning. Democratic chances of winning the House have slowly started to tick up, now up to 29% from 21% at the start. They're favored to win 208 seats, up from 203 in all poll-based starting estimates. Obviously, we could go 0 for 4 in these key Senate races coming up, right? Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada. There's some frightening Nevada numbers that John Ralston, I talked to him earlier this week and he was a little bit more bullish, but I think out in Nevada, he's like a big Nevada observer. He was showing that there's some really tough turnout numbers out there. But on the flip side, the Fetterman numbers that we know as of this recording look really good. Nate Cohn from the New York Times tweeted out just a couple of minutes ago that Fetterman's outrunning Biden just about everywhere in Pennsylvania. Our estimate now leans Democratic. Now, one thing to be careful with when that happens is you can outrun Biden in your districts, but if there's a rural avalanche of turnout and your turnout isn't great, right? Like you can outrun Biden in the percentage of votes, but still your turnout doesn't equal the rural turnout. That can happen for sure. I don't have any reason to believe that just quite yet. There's some Arizona numbers that look good right now that came out, but Arizona is what they call a blue mirage state, which is I think they released the absentee balloting first. So I think it overestimates Democratic votes at first, from what I understand. So we don't have much to say about that yet, but at least we're in the game for the Senate right now. As of this moment, we're in the game. It looks like Walker and Warnock are in a dead heat right now, and I can't make heads or tails of what's going on over there.
Well, so we're in the game for the Senate. The other thing is we're in the game for some of the most important gubernatorial races, right? So Arizona, I mean, basically it's the states where we think are going to be the most consequential in 2 years in a presidential election. And you know, it's so messed up, man. The most consequential, not in like how people vote, but in like how, like whether the vote matters.
Yeah.
You know, like, so like you said, it's early in Arizona, but Hobbs is ahead. Unfortunately, in Georgia, it does not look like our friend Stacey is going to win.
Yeah.
Which sucks. But I was thinking, just a sidebar here. I was thinking about this today. I was thinking about Stacey, and I was thinking about Beto, for instance. And it's really, our country is the only one that has this thing where if you run a couple of times and you lose, you're supposedly sidelined. Because when you think about countries like, I don't know, the UK, where there's just like an opposition party and there's like a shadow cabinet, like it's like, it's not like, oh, well, that person ran for prime minister, that person ran for that, like they're done. No, it's like when party control switches back and forth, we know who controls that party. It's much more like, Nancy Pelosi becoming speaker after that we took the House, or so it's just a peculiar American thing. 83% of the vote is in Kansas. Now I'm not saying this is a pivotal race in 24, but like it's someone who was born in Kansas and I can almost throw a rock at it from my house. It's just continually crazy to me that like the Democrat is still leading by 4 points in Kansas. So those things are all good. Whitmer's going to win in Michigan, I think. It looks that way. And then you've got Wisconsin, where Evers is in the really close race. So, and then Shapiro winning in Pennsylvania means because he appoints the Secretary of State, you're going to have a Democratic Secretary of State in Pennsylvania. So.
Yeah, I think our candidate won in Colorado as well, our Secretary of State candidate out there. So
yeah,
that's good news.
Jana Griswold, yeah.
So all in all, so far, so good, mostly.
Like so far as good as we could hope for.
Yeah, Lurie in Virginia lost. So we won Spanberger, but we lost another important race there in Virginia. But it looks like we've come out ahead, all things considered, in Virginia compared to what the estimates were saying. It looks like Hochul in New York is looking pretty solid to win. I just actually heard victory parties right next to our building, so I just hopped over there just to I miss campaign life, so I just walked over there.
Do you really?
I just miss like the night of the elections when you're feeling good. Not when you're feeling bad, but I was feeling good as the results coming in.
I'm so happy to be home at my house right now. Like
I just walk. It's one of the great things about New York and where I live is I was able to walk down the street 2 blocks, and they had the Hochul party, and I was like seeing all these Democratic operatives I hadn't seen forever. And then on my way home, I ran into, there was like a little bar. There was an assembly candidate celebrating her victory, and I ran into a whole bunch of other activists, cool. And I was just like, wow, this is great. Like I hadn't had this energy in a while. It almost makes me miss campaigning, but I'm not quite there yet, because it's the only night like that of the
I get it. I'm trying to think. I don't think there's some times when I miss.
By the way, side note, I know that football had to show up in here, but this is actually about elections. I was in the parking lot of the MetLife Stadium with my father, waiting for my family to arrive for the game that we went to all watch over the weekend. And he says to me, "Hey, Zeldin is doing really well in New York. Maybe I have a chance." I was like,
That's right. Okay,
I was like,
for those
yeah,
not aware, you have to update them on the
yeah.
backstory of that.
My father, I had thought was, back in the spring, updated our audience. He was on the ballot for state senator as a Republican in Manhattan. If you're new to the show, my dad is like a Trump Republican. I thought he just didn't get on the ballot because he's been in Europe. He's been in Miami. He went to the
Taking it
game.
really
He
seriously.
went to the game with me on the Sunday before election day.
Well, first of all, that's nice that you and your
Yeah.
dad have been hanging out. I'm glad
Yeah,
to
we were
hear
hanging
that.
out. Yeah, my brother was there too, for our listeners who've been following that story. But so my dad's like, "Yeah, I think I have a shot." And I said to him, I was like, "You don't have a shot." Yeah, he lost. Obviously, he's a Republican running in Manhattan. I was like, "Not only do you not have a chance, but I was like, if you did, this would be even crazier. Why are you here then?" Like, it's really crazy. It's like delusional. But yeah, it's my one family story. Yeah, he was
That's
running
hilarious.
against somebody I know. I didn't even check. It's how little this even
Yeah,
registered.
it's Manhattan.
I hadn't even looked at it. But yeah, so the Gupta family political run is over. So your family member, your distant relative, won tonight. My very
Well,
direct
hopefully,
relative
we'll see.
lost tonight. So
All right. Well, here's another race that's under the radar that is, I think, very important, which is the Secretary of State's race in Arizona, where our friend Adrian Fontes, who has been on the show once, maybe twice, former Maricopa County recorder, who lost his reelect in 2020, is the Secretary of State candidate for the Dems. He is up 59-41
nice.
with 47% in, which, to compare that to, Katie Hobbs is up about 57-43. So he is actually outpacing her by 2 points, which, so Secretary of State in Arizona obviously is going to be a huge deal in 2 years. So
I hope they all win. I mean,
yeah.
if we can get all of those in Arizona, but that's the one we got to be careful about that state again, because of the way that they report those numbers, it could flip. Yeah, and so I think, like, and for keeping score, we need to win 3 out of the 4 in order to keep the Senate. So we need to win 3 out of the 4 of Pennsylvania, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, unless we do an upset in Wisconsin. So we've got to win. Yeah, I think if the Fetterman numbers continue to look good, Kelly so far looks decent, but again, those numbers are tough. We would just need one of the next 2. So
okay. What's in not great news, as I think we mentioned, JD Vance beat Tim Ryan in Ohio, and Grassley won in Iowa. A listener asked, they said Vance beat Ryan in Ohio despite a great campaign from Ryan. Is Ohio a lost cause? I'm not sure. What do you think? What's a lost cause? But
I think if this race were held in August, Ryan wins this race. So I think we were close, and I think the way we look at this is the way, if the divisional game ended with 13 seconds left, the Bills would probably win the Super Bowl, which we took as an opportunity to prepare in the offseason. And that's what I think we should do looking at Ohio. Like, I think the Ryan race gives us a lot to work with in terms of the way he ran, the energy he brought, the message he brought, the person he was, the connection he had to that state, the fact that he was a heads down local candidate where he didn't really lean into any national celebrity. I think these are all things that are really important. And he had a populist message and took it head on against a venture capitalist fraud and almost won a state, and way outperformed. Like, it reminds me a lot of your race. Like, when you ran, he way outperformed any conceivable national Democratic number in the gubernatorial campaign.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, that generally when you're going to outperform, it's usually not going to be in a Senate race. It's usually going to be in a gubernatorial race, right? Because people just tend to vote in a more parliamentary way for the Senate because they just go, well, which party do I want? Whereas with governor, they're aware that the governor has to do shit, right? And so like, yes, I think Ryan really outperformed. So on the one hand, it kind of makes you go like, could that be the high water mark? That's the concern, right? Because like if you compare it to my race in Missouri, people run every year. I mean, that Senate race is already not every year, but people run every cycle, and they talk about our race. That Senate race has already been called tonight. Eric Schmidt's going to be the senator from my state, and what happens is people run and they say, well, Jason Kander got whatever we got, 46, 47. I don't remember what it was. And they say, and they act like, well, we're going to build on that. And a lot of smart people point out that's been the high watermark. That's not the point you build from. So I don't, look, Ohio's not a lost cause. Ohio's pretty red, if we're being real.
It's interesting. Florida and Ohio, two states that we were watching perennially for these races. They're both pretty tough for us. Florida is going to be a long way for us to build back. We're losing Miami-Dade County today for the first time.
I think this is for the presidential campaign in 24. To me, this is, how about we not throw gazillions of dollars at this massive state that's not going to go our way.
Yeah. We got to, I think we got to look to the states that are now on the board that didn't used to be on the board. We got to look to Arizona. We got to look to Georgia, North Carolina, winnable.
Oh, for sure.
These are all winnable states.
If you want a long-term play, it's Texas.
Yeah. Texas is one of those states where I'm like, man, I'm worried that we'll just keep throwing stuff at it and we don't ever get there. But
but it's a long-term play. And the problem is that in the past, I think that everybody thought, oh, well, the Hispanic vote, that's why Texas. No, that doesn't have to be why Texas is in play. Texas can be in play because people are moving to Texas, because Texas is not getting older at the same pace that a lot of states like mine are. Right. Austin is growing. So with all of, really, I see Texas could become a lot like the way North Carolina is. Like North Carolina got a huge influx of people not from North Carolina. And Texas is starting to do that. And so that's why I think there's potential there. Yeah,
this is why I'm extremely interested in the Nevada results, because that's a state that, although I don't say we count on it, it's usually got to be pretty solidly D for us to have a good night in a presidential year. And it's a state that's population has changed pretty tremendously. I was looking at some numbers. It just shifts a lot. There are a lot of people who moved there, and there is a bit of there's a theory out there that there's I call them fiscal refugees from California. Like the people who moved to Austin also moved to Nevada because they don't have taxes. And, the kind of person who moves to a state to avoid that couple percentage state tax is maybe not a Democratic voter. So we'll keep an eye on what that looks like there, because I don't know. We'll see. Who knows? Because there's so much. We're comparing these numbers to 2018 numbers often. Right. And what was different now than 2018 is we had a pandemic in the middle and more people vote early than before. Yeah, sorry. No, 2018. No.
What's different? You're saying what's different since 2018? Yeah, we're having more early vote. Yes.
Yeah, people learn to vote differently because we can't compare it to 2020 because it's just presidential. So they're comparing it all to a year where the voting behavior was way, way, way different.
Yeah, well, and like the motivation was totally different. I mean, Trump was president.
Right.
So it was kind of reversed, but another bright spot, by the way, is Sharice Davids, Congresswoman from the Kansas 3rd, who, that's my parents' district, but that's not why I bring it up. I bring it up because one, Sharice is pretty cool, and two, the Republicans really thought they were going to get that district this time.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, like they've been going after it for a while. It's a suburban district. They really, they gerrymandered the hell out of it, and she was, marked for for dead in this race, and she's won relatively comfortably. So I think that's interesting. It says something about the suburbs in the middle of the country potentially. I mean, Charisse is a woman of color, and she's gay, and like they were like, yeah, she's going down, and not happening. So she's done a great job.
Well, I'm going to make sense of this. You may know this district because Kansas way better than I do, but there's this tweet coming across my feed that says, in a stunning upset, Jason Probst, Democrat of the Kansas House District 102, has apparently won re-election to his Trump plus 15 state house seat in Hutchinson. Oh. Wow, that's pretty impressive.
I don't know anything about Jason Probst, but I've been to Hutchinson, and it is a stunning upset.
That's pretty amazing.
So
Laura Kelly leads. That was 40 minutes ago. Laura Kelly was leading Schmidt in the Kansas governor's race. That was the most recent number I got on that.
Also, last I saw, we should look again. Last I saw, and this is important, just for spite and a little bit for other things, but mostly for spite, is that Chris Kobach was, at least a minute ago, was trailing for attorney general. He's still running for things, by the way.
Yeah, and who knows? We're not Nate Cohn, so we don't know what precincts are reporting or not. But that's the beauty of the live show the night of the election. We could be wrong about so many things and get away with it.
That's right.
So I think, and just to give our listeners a sense of what comes next, we're recording this tonight. It'll hit our feed in the morning, and we have a very special guest tomorrow for our podcast. Should we say who it is, Jason?
Yeah, sure. Al Franken.
Al Franken, not Admiral Franken. Yeah, at least he hasn't been promoted yet, but he'll be on tomorrow. We booked him thinking he would bring some levity to a tough day, but maybe he'll bring some levity to a less than tough day than we're expecting. That could be fun. But once again, we'll know what happens out west. But actually, we may not even know tomorrow. Like in a lot of these states, it could take days to count the vote, just like last time.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to know that much more tomorrow, but we'll see. We'll see. All right. Are there any more specific ones we should go through before we kind of talk about the overall here?
I think that's all I got.
Okay. Well, I think it's important because look, we were thinking, okay, if this goes really bad, how are we going to make people feel not totally horrible, right?
Yeah.
And so,
did you write your pump-up speech? Do you have it there?
Okay.
Any given Sunday speech?
Grace has been trying to get us to talk about Florida, and so before I go into any of that, I just got a separate text from Grace that says, dudes, talk about Florida.
I thought we did talk about Florida.
I thought we did too, but okay. I think what she means is, like, you referenced that Miami-Dade. I mean, that's a big deal that we didn't win. I mean, say more.
I don't have an answer. Honestly, I do have Carlos Curbelo in my office tomorrow, who was the GOP congressman from Miami-Dade. So I'll be talking to him in the morning. So I'll have more to say, I guess is the point. And he knows more than anybody. He was a non-Trump Republican. He hosts a podcast for us at Lost Debate. So it's great that we have him on our team. I'll ask him. He'll know. I think what he has been saying, we have a Spanish language podcast with him, which seems more important than ever, where he has somebody more left-leaning as his co-host. And part of what our mission is to fight misinformation, which seems like a lot of people are saying there was a lot of misinformation kicking around in Florida within the Spanish language community. That'll definitely be one. But one big thing he talks about, which we've talked about in this podcast before, is that especially in Florida, but everywhere, the Hispanic so-called Hispanic community really is not one community. It's many, many, many different communities, and with, a lot of preferences that can go either way. There are fiscal conservatives, there are social conservatives, et cetera. And there's also a very popular mayor in Miami. It's like a weird system where there's like the mayor of Miami, and then there's the county, and everything is tricky, but there's a popular Republican mayor there. I think DeSantis I think the hurricane improved the standing of DeSantis, like his handling of it. And I think that came at like an opportune time for him in that race. And I think he's definitely played culture war politics to his advantage. And I think Democrats don't, I don't think they take seriously the effectiveness enough. I mean, obviously there's some who do, but they don't take seriously enough the effectiveness of the culture war politics on communities of color. It's not just about white voters. I think people think of it as like just racist dog whistles, but there's way more than that. There are many dog whistles beyond the racist ones. And sometimes racist dog whistles work with people of color too. You know, things are complicated. And but I'll ask him and get more from him, and maybe I'll get some snippets for an interview that I can share with you guys either tomorrow or the next day. He'll be in the studio as we're recording with Frank, so maybe I can pull him in and ask him some questions.
I also think that, you know, we have to be more realistic about Florida, like in general. Like, you know, in the 90s, Florida was up for grabs at the times because it was so heavily old, and that old folks used to mostly vote for Democrats. They used to vote on issues like Social Security and Medicare and things like that. And I don't know if you've looked around, but old people are kind of, I don't know, grouchy, and that tends to go more, you know, like they're not voting that way anymore. Like
old people are grouchy.
Old people are like, they're grouchier than they used to be. Like they're grouchier than I mean, it's particularly when they're old and white, and they're like, it used to be this way. And like the fucking Make America Great Again was tailor made for old people.
This is the number one piece of evidence. I know that you have no plans to run for Senate ever again. Like there's one people you don't fuck with when you're running for office, or old people.
Yeah.
And especially in Missouri, old white people. Man.
Yeah, well, look,
right.
Old people, it takes a long time for old people to consider themselves old, but yeah. But my point is, like, I think that's one of the big things that's changed. Like the older people in this country are not reliably voting for the party that makes sure that old people have the shit that they need the way that they used to. They tend to be voting much more on the idea of like, shit was better when I was young, and what's with all these people who don't look like me getting power. And that, I think, is a big part of it. And Florida's like, we've always treated it like it's not, you know, in the South. I mean, like a huge part of it is a rural Southern state. So I don't think it's that surprising. You know, in the 90s, for a while, Republicans still thought they were going to get California because they had Reagan and all that stuff. And I think we're treating Florida the way they used to treat California, which is you got to let it go. Not like off the.
I sometimes wonder whether Texas. I sometimes wonder whether Texas is that for us, but
it might be. Texas might be fool's gold. I'm just saying we can't try both.
In a weird way, Texas feels like what California was for the Republicans, because it's a state Democrats used to dominate in the way that Republicans used to dominate California, which I find fascinating. But the other dynamic here, as we look ahead, is, you know, at the state level, there are state legislatures that are getting more extreme candidates on races that we're not even watching, and the fiscal environment is going to turn on these states. A lot of them were getting pandemic stimulus, and they were able to, you know, talk a big talk about limited government while getting the largesse that was sent their ways, and also riding the sort of coattails of boom times and surpluses in their budgets. And if this recession continues, and we also know for sure they're not going to get more stimulus, especially because the Republicans are taking the House, but I don't think even in an environment where Democrats had it, they were going to get it. I think there are going to be some hard choices, and you know better than anybody what's happened to Kansas.
Yeah.
You know, why are we even talking about a Democrat who could possibly win Kansas? Because Brownback screwed up that state so bad. And so I think we're going to start seeing these dynamics in some of the states.
You're basically saying that the best thing that can happen for Democrats, sadly, seems to be when Republicans get to make the decisions.
Yeah, at least at some of these states. And I don't, you know, look, I've got my issues in Kansas. Like I've been making strides with the bakers out there since the last time I talked about it. But I'm not saying I want you to have bad government in Kansas. I want you to have the best government you possibly can have. I'm saying
I got what you're saying. You're saying people tend to find out that these people who don't like government aren't good at running it, but they got to be in charge for them to figure it out. So text from our producers.
Okay, wait. Oh yeah, Vance looks like a likely win. The New York Times is saying. Whoa! I mean, sorry, not Vance. Fetterman.
Yeah.
Whoa.
That's a big deal.
Okay.
That's really cool.
Let's see. An election where Oz and Walker.
Dr. Oz will have to go back to selling whatever drinkable urine or whatever that was.
Wow, that's huge. All right, well, let's pretend that that's actually true, because I think like our listeners will forgive us if we're wrong about that, because that's just what the information says.
That's a huge relief. So that's one out of
that's big.
That's one out of the 3 of the 4 that we need.
Can we pause and talk about the fact that Fetterman had a stroke in the spring and we did it? Like, good job.
I mean,
team.
I don't think we've ever said this. I don't think we've ever said this publicly. John was supposed to come on our podcast
I remember that
day.
Yeah. That's crazy.
It was like, I think it was like that day, and then he had to reschedule, and then we found out he had a stroke. And I don't know why I mentioned that, other than just to say that was a thing. But like that's, I don't really think you can point to a better example of how this was not the election the Republicans were thinking they were going to get, and that all of us were thinking was going to happen several months ago. Fetterman had a stroke. Like he had a debate where he had to have captions. I mean, like, nothing wrong with that, but like, it wouldn't be your first choice in campaign strategy. Like, if you had a choice. So that's huge.
Well, we just need 2 more. If this is true, we just need either 2 of Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia. 2 out of 3 of those. And if Wisconsin somehow is better than people were projecting, that obviously adds something to the mix. Wow. Good job, Fetterman, for fighting through that. Good job, his campaign. Good job to the people of Pennsylvania, if that holds.
Good job, Oz, being like, really cringy. Way to go, Oz. That was
that is a true pickup. I think that's our first true pickup of the night, right?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yep. That is a pickup. That's
great.
That's a big deal. All right. Well, that brings me to how I was going to just try and cheer anybody up who needs cheering up. I was just going to say, I mean, I think you and I went into this thinking we were going to have to do a lot of cheering people up.
That's for sure.
And I just would like to say that I would like to remind people that this is an election where we hold the White House, traditionally very, very bad for your chances in the midterms, and we hold the Senate by none. Like, I mean, it's tied, and we get the only reason we hold it is the vice president. And like, we're sitting here at 11:35 Eastern, 10:35 Central, going like, okay, we need a couple more wins and we hold the Senate. Like, that's not something I thought was gonna. I mean, I remember we've talked about this over the last year, where at times we were like, okay, well, we got to do everything we can now because we're going to lose the Senate in 2022. Like, we were saying that a year ago. We might have been wrong.
Yeah, I mean, this could be, Jason, the first time I can remember that the polls were underrepresenting Democrats.
Mm-hmm. Why would that happen?
Young people.
You know what? No, I'll tell you why. Actually, let's not assume that the polls were totally on the up and up. You know, you've employed pollsters, I think. I have. I will tell you, the way a poll is weighted is everything, right? So everybody's always trying to compare. That's what 538 figured out a long time ago, is that comparing one poll to another and like saying, oh, he was up or she was up by 4, but this poll has him to, it makes no sense. You have to look at the weighting of the poll. And I'm telling you that I would bet you my paycheck that a lot of the reason that Democrats may have been underrepresented in these polls is because if they were overrepresented last time, pollsters don't want to make the same mistake twice, because they're going to lose business if they do. And so they would have just weighted the polls to have a higher turnout of Republicans than maybe even they really thought, because they were trying to be safe. And then that's how you get polls that underrepresent Democrats.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and I don't blame them, because they got caught with their pants down so many times.
It's like a super hard thing to do. Like,
right. And who answers their phones? It's like, I don't even know how you do that. Like, honestly, I'm always amazed that they even try. Like, how would they get in touch with us? Like,
Yeah.
Anybody in your life, do you know anybody who picks up, first of all, anybody with a landline? I don't know anybody, but but anybody who picks up their cell phone when there's a number they don't recognize.
Yeah. We all screen our calls.
Never.
It's why when I was running, it's why I liked focus groups so much more, particularly focus groups where you can stick with the same people, because that's how you get a sense for which messages are really moving, because you can see whether they moved the person who wasn't moved by the last message. And so I think those are rarely seen by the public. I'd be much more interested. I don't enjoy watching the focus groups that are like, let's get a bunch of batshit crazy people together and watch them like we're driving by a car accident, and then let's listen to them. That's what they put on cable news, like, watch while this person tells us that birds aren't real. But I do think it's valuable if you can have an actual focus group. The problem is, like, who would do that anymore? Like, who would be like, I'll go in and be publicly have my face in a focus group so that Twitter can make me into a terrible person. Anyway, but
I have more good news, by the way. If you want
good.
more.
Lay it on me.
Democrat Greg Landsman in Ohio has been elected to Congress. This is a flip. The seat was previously held by Republicans. That's as of 5 minutes ago.
That's cool.
Yeah, I don't know anything about whatever that race is, but a flip sounds nice to me.
We should talk about election integrity here real quick. But before we do that, I do kind of want to check back and see if my very good friend, my distant cousin, who I don't really know, is winning still in Colorado against Lauren Boebert. So let's see. Can we?
Yeah, let's take a look. This is what live podcasting is all about.
Lauren Underwood still up, by the way.
Good.
Yeah,
arena
but a couple. Yeah.
Arena candidates have done decently well. Max lost in Staten Island pretty quickly.
Yeah, pretty. But he
knew.
Yeah, we couldn't say that publicly, but like, he was going down with the ship, which for an Army guy, pretty admirable. While you look that up, election integrity. I think it's really troubling that in an election where the Republicans thought that they were, they think they're going to win more than they lose, and they were feeling pretty confident and starting to feel like maybe they were going to win big, that they were still out there campaigning against the idea that our elections work. That scares me for two reasons. One, it is clearly let's just continue to destroy confidence in the election process because it will redound to our benefit in 2024, like a long play, big lie. That's scary. But the other reason it scares me is that means this is just becoming a built-in point, like a built-in value set for Republicans. They're just like, elections don't work. Even like when they think it's going to go their way, they just say it like out of reflex. Like, that's really scary to me.
Yeah. I'm anxiously watching Arizona with the Kerry Lake campaign, because there's nobody who's just fully embraced this.
Right.
Like,
she's been running the whole time on the idea that, like, that none of these elections, like, that none of them are legit.
Yeah, I have a friend who works for I won't say which show, but a TV show where she has to travel around and covers like rallies and things like that. And she was saying, like, these rallies are more so even than 2020 are like full-on fascist rallies. Where, like, how do we lock up our political enemies? There's no pretense of democracy anymore. And so that fight continues. Like, the one downside to not having like a super disappointing night is that whenever these disappointing nights happen, sometimes we have that energy, like when you and I met at Arena, where we're like, man, everything, we need to just tear everything down and build it back up again. And there's a camaraderie and a sense of urgency and all of that. We have to be careful that if a decent night comes, that we don't just take it for granted, because
right,
this is not the kind of thing that, as we know, like, anytime anything good happens, like, we have to build on it. Or the Republicans, they're like Mike Myers, man. They just they're back for, you can't kill it, like, you can't kill him.
And not Wayne's World Mike Myers.
Yeah,
like
not Mike Myers,
the ski mask guy.
Yeah, Yeah.
Speaking of Republicans that are hard to kill, I shouldn't say it that way. I mean, just then live YouTube. See, I mean, this is what I think makes us liberals, is that I'm like, I don't think I should say that. But anyway, Republicans that don't seem to go away politically, that race is now likely according to the New York Times, the Adam Frisch versus Lauren Boebert, even though Frisch is still ahead by 4 points with 71% of the votes in. What I will say about this is that probably isn't really going to matter.
Wait, give me those numbers one more time. What did you just say?
It's Adam Frisch has an 8,000 vote lead, almost 8,000 votes with 71% of the vote in, but New York Times thing is saying it's likely R. So I don't know. That must mean there's some Republican votes coming, but whether he wins or loses, we should remember that it's unlikely the House is going to pivot on that race. That's more of just a Schadenfreude sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it would be nice.
Yeah.
And it's like nobody that's the kind of night it is, really. Like, I think that sums it up, is that nobody at the beginning of the night was thinking, who might lose is Lauren Boebert. Or Boebert, I don't know how to say it.
I like Boebert,
but I think she's Boebert, Lauren Boebert. Nobody thought that she had any shot of losing at the beginning of the night. And you can't have a race where, like, Marjorie Taylor Greene's best buddy in Congress is like a toss up, at the end of the night, and go like, oh, well, this was a red wave. Like, so I guess my takeaway from all this at this point is, I don't know whether we're going to hold the Senate. I don't know any of that stuff. But I was worried that it was going to be one of those nights where it's like, oh, democracy's over, a resounding, and that's not what it is. Like, no matter how this ends, it's like we're in the fight for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to do one last look at some of our key races. So right now, Georgia's a straight toss up, according to New York Times, just straight up 49-49. Let's look at Wisconsin before we go. I would love to see what that's looking like. Wisconsin is leaning towards Johnson. He's ahead by like 1.5. And let's see what they're saying about Arizona. Toss up Arizona, even though Kelly's way ahead in the vote total. I think that means that they're seeing something there in what vote has come through. So, yeah. Okay, so that gives us a lot to work with. Anything else, Jason? I think we're good.
No, I'm gonna get a good night's sleep because there ain't gonna be much more tonight. So we will talk to everybody tomorrow. Again, we're gonna have Al Franken on. So no matter how you're feeling tomorrow, that's probably gonna be something that, you're gonna laugh. And also, like, Al's super smart. He's gonna have great analysis of all this stuff. So that'll be fun. So tomorrow, I guess tomorrow's show, if you're listening to this, that's tomorrow's show. If you're watching us right now, that's the show that comes out at its usual time on Thursday. So, all right. Oh yeah. The platform thing. Remember, we all have a platform. Make sure to use yours today.
All right.
Later.
Let's see. I think I have to do the normal sign out. Let's see.
I think so.
I can't.
No, you don't have to do. Okay. If you can, great.
Yeah, I don't have it off the top of my head.
It's funny. This whole thing started with us being like, "Are we live?" And then my wife texting me a few minutes later, like, "Yeah, you were live that whole time."
Hi, Diana.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, cool.
Oh, here's something fun to end on before, or if we're still live.
Yeah.
The producers just sent this. It's a tweet from the senior writer at National Review. All the chatter on my conservative and GOP channels is rage at Trump like I've never seen. And then it's a quote. The one guy he attacked before Election Day was DeSantis, the clear winner. Meanwhile, all his guys are shitting the bed. So,
I want to believe that it's going to matter, but somehow I don't think the National Review bow tie wear types are going to be calling the shots on who gets the nomination. I think Trump has proven that he can muscle through that.
Yeah, that's just the bow tie types being like, hey, people don't like Trump, really.
I want them to win that battle.
Yeah, I know. We all
really do. I would love to see Trump gone. But I'm a little bit cautious about their ability to take on that fight.
Yeah. All right. We should stop this thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.